Okay, so this video is going to look at the sources on the Battle of Salamis, and having a look down the list you can see there's a varying number of different chunks of Herodotus, so you need to find in your source books the Battle of Salamis. The first part of the Herodotus source is going to talk about who was basically there at Salamis, so these are really useful facts and figures to talk about the Hellenic League. So we have the Athenians furnishing 127 ships, Plataeans man the ships with the Athenians, the Corinthians bring 40 ships, the Megarians 20, Chalcidians 20, the boats from Aegina was 18, from Scionia 12, Spartans 10, the Epidaurians 8, Erythraeans 7, those from Trozone 5, and from Stateria 2, and then Cian 2. And there's a couple of others mentioned. Now, you're not expected to know all of those facts and figures, but if you could pick out a couple of key ones, it does show the extent of the army, or the naval force that was put together, but also the fact that obviously you've got lots of Greek states working together in order to protect themselves against the Persians. So those are the four sources that come to Artemisium first. So the Battle of Salamis divides into two parts. There is an initial skirmish at Artemisium, and then there is the Battle of Salamis that follows. Both of these follow on from Thermopylae. So remember, Thermopylae was just trying to slow the Persians down. The Spartans and their allies didn't particularly think they were going to win this particular battle. What they were trying to allow to happen was that Athens could evacuate the city to protect lives. So after Thermopylae, Athens is attacked and burnt, which is mentioned in this source further down. And then there are two naval battles. There's Artemisium, and then there's the Battle of Salamis that occurs straight after. So it's just be aware that you can put these two battles together, and it would make a lot more sense. By the way, if you heard a weird sort of chirrupy sound and a thud, that was my cat jumping off the desk. I've got a slightly more sensitive microphone for this, so apologies if you could hear it. If not, ignore me. Anyway, so they go to Artemisium for battle, and Herodotus tells us that the number of ships who were at Artemisium was 271, besides 50 oared barks. I guess it's a different type of boat. And the Spartans, again, because of the head of the Hellenic League, provide the admiral, and the chief in command is Eurybiades, this guy here. Okay. So they're trying to get some other allies from Sicily, and in those discussions there's been talk about maybe giving the command to the Athenians. However, the other allies resist, and the Athenians say, oh no, it's fine, we don't want the command. The reason why they were pushing maybe for Athens to have the command is obviously that Athens is a naval power and that Sparta is not. However, Athens says, no, we don't want the command because we're thinking about all of Greece first and foremost, and seeing if they quarrelled over the leadership, then the Greece will perish. So they're sort of saying, bigger picture is more important here, not our command. And this is what Herodotus basically says in these three sentences down here. It is clear for when then he jumps forward quite a lot in history. So I've highlighted it because it's not relevant for the Persian War, but it will become really useful later on when you have to read a lot of Thucydides talking about some key events. And here you've got it mentioned in Herodotus as well. So for a bit of variety, after the Persian War, when they were sort of going around taking Persian lands, they made a pretext of Pausanias' high-handedness and took the command away from the Spartans. So Pausanias was one of the Spartan commanders. He treated Athens and the other allies really badly in the Hellenic League. This is right at the end of the Persian War. It's one of the causes of the Peloponnesian War, is his treatment of the allies. And it caused the split in the Hellenic League. And you get the Peloponnesian League under the Spartans, and you get the Daunian League under the Athenians. So this is what this bit is talking about. So it's not relevant to the Persian War in the slightest, but it becomes relevant later on in the course. So when the generals from the mentioned cities met at Salamis, so we've had a little bit about, they were sort of meeting at Artemisium, and they're also meeting at Salamis, and they hold a council. And the admiral, Eurybiades, sort of proposes whoever wanted to should give his opinion, so he's open to ideas. So Attica, so that's the land surrounding Athens, is already lost, and he proposed that they consider the places which were left, i.e. what we're going to do next. The consensus of most of the speakers was to sail to the isthmus, and fight at sea for the Peloponnese. That's the land surrounding Sparta. And the reason they give is if they're defeated in the fight at Salamis, they would be besieged on an island where no help could come to them, but if they were at the isthmus, they could go ashore to their own lands. So it's about sort of location. Should we fight here or fight somewhere else? And there is obviously a division between the different Greek commanders. So again, we got some evidence here that the Greeks were not always of one voice, that they were often divided when it comes to technique, or tactics, sorry, is better phrasing, during the Persian War. So while the generals from sort of the Spartan area considered this argument, an Athenian came with a message that the barbarians had reached Attica and were destroying all of it by fire. So the Persians arrive in Athens and burn it. So what we have here is a really good, not good, but an effect of conflict, which is quite a straightforward one to explain. So Xerxes' army had gone through Boeotia and they burnt the city of the Thespians, and they abandoned it, gone through to Plataea, and the army come to Athens and was devastating everything there. So they burnt these two places as well. So loss of lands in Attica, so the lands surrounding Athens have been destroyed while this is all going on. But that was kind of not the purpose of Thermopylae, was also to allow the Athenians and everyone else to escape, because they knew obviously Xerxes was coming after them. So then the source jumps a bit, you'll notice, in the numbers. So I think essentially because there's lots of description about what was burning, and then Herodotus gets slightly to the point. So some of the Peloponnesian generals become really alarmed hearing about what's happened in Athens. And they don't even wait for this discussion to occur, and in fact they jump onto the ships and hoist their sails for flight. So they're going to run away. This is not the Spartan leadership, it's just those who are from the Peloponnese area. And those who are left behind resolved that fleet should fight for the isthmus. So this is sort of like maybe a decision is being made. I will point out this is not the final decision. Then we have Themistocles. So an Athenian general comes back to his ship, and another Athenian, who I have no idea how you pronounce this name, asked him what had been decided, and Themistocles has heard that they've resolved to go to Isthmus, and he basically thinks this is like a really stupid idea. It's a bit of a spoiler. And he says if they depart from Salamis, they will no longer be fighting for one country. Each will make their own to his own city, and neither Eurybiades or any other man will be able to keep them from disbanding the army. Hellas will be destroyed by bad planning. So he thinks this idea of going to the Isthmus is ridiculous. Essentially, the Greeks will become divided, the forces will be split, and that's it. It's the end of Greece. Persia will win. So he says, if there's any way you can do to persuade the Spartan commanders to change the decision, go and do it. So then Themistocles is really happy that he's been given this advice by this guy, and he sort of goes, right, okay. So he goes to Eurybiades, and when he arrives there, he says he wants to talk to him on a matter of common interest. Eurybiades allows him on the ship. Themistocles sat next to him and told him all he'd heard from him, pretending it was his own lie. This is typical Themistocles. A little white lie is very helpful to him, and this is one of his little white lies. And he adds other things to it, and then he persuades him to disembark and gather the generals for a council of all. In fact, we will highlight that while we're at it. So this is Themistocles using rhetoric to convince the people to change their opinion. That will be really useful for section B when we get to it, but for now we have the idea that Themistocles is emerging as a key individual in the Persian War. So when they're assembled and Eurybiades comes forward, Themistocles speaks, and he basically repeats all of the arguments up here. And there is a Corinthian general, Adimyantus, I think is how you say his name, who really doesn't like Themistocles and has a few digs at him coming up later on in the source. So he says at this point, Themistocles gains those who start before the signal are beaten with rods, i.e. if you make a move too fast you'll be defeated. And Themistocles says, yeah, but those who leave behind don't win. So maybe a bit cheating is fine. So this is considered quite mildly, and he doesn't talk to Eurybiades about what he said previously about it, how that if it's put up from Salamis they flee in different ways. He doesn't want to accuse the allies of basically being cowards. So he goes through a different argument. So this is Themistocles being a great commander and using rhetoric to persuade people and bring the Greeks together. So he says, quite nicely, it is in your hands to save Hellas or Greece if you obey me and remain here to fight, and not obey the words of these others and move your ships back to the isthmus. So it's quite obvious what he wants them to do. Stay at Salamis and fight. Compare each plan after you've heard. If you join the battle at the isthmus, you will fight in the open sea, where it is least to our advantage. since our ships are heavier and fewer in number. So here is a good tactical reason for why the Greeks should stay where they are. So remember, one of the key bullet points we look at is the reasons why the Persians lost the war, and one of them is about terrain, and also another one is about Greek tactics. So here we have about a Greek tactic emerging here, where Themistocles knows the land, the sea, and goes, look, where we are here actually is a really good place. If we go to the Isthmus, we are going to be putting ourselves in a really difficult situation. And because they'll be having this problem, you will also lose Salamis, Megara and Aegina. So you'll lose loads of places as a result of it. Their armed army will accompany the fleet, which is certainly true. That happened from Thermopylae into Athens. And then you will lead them into the Peloponnese and risk the whole of Greece. So he says this is a really ridiculous idea. So he suggests by engaging many ships without few in the strait. So remember, strait is where land sort of narrows on both sides, and it's like narrow for the water. We will win a great victory. So he's talking basically about funneling the Persians. So there's lots of ships, funnel them to a smaller area that the Greeks will be at an advantage. He says, if the war turns out well, it's to our advantage to fight in a strait and to our advantage to fight on a wide area. So he said basically, don't play into what the Persians want to do, which is fight on open sea. We should fight in a smaller area because our ships then have the advantage. And he says, secondly, Salamis will survive, and that's where our women and children are, and they'll be safe. And obviously, by remaining here, you'll be fighting for the Peloponnese just as much as the Isthmus, and you will not lead them to the Peloponnese. So he said, you'll be fighting for the same reason, it's just you're not leading them anywhere, and to the sort of detriment of the whole of Greece instead. So I would suggest it's quite a good argument. I think he has a point. And this last section is basically sort of reaffirming it. So if what I expect happens to win victory with our ships, we will not have the barbarians upon you at the Isthmus. True. They will advance no further than Attica and depart in no order. We shall gain an advantage by the survival of Megara, Aegina and Salamis. We'll keep our allies. Where it prophesies we will prevail against our enemies. It's always prophesied. Many succeed when they have reasonable plans. If their plans are unreasonable, the gods do not wish to assent to human intentions. So a carefully well-made plan will win us the day, is the general gist of that. So as Themistocles said this, we have Idamantus the Corinthian then attacks him. And he says quite a horrible thing. He says, advises that a man without a city should keep quiet. He's saying, Themistocles, Athens is destroyed. Why should we listen to you? Bit harsh. And that Eurybiades should not ask the vote of a man without a city. Ouch. He advised Themistocles to contribute his opinion when he provided a city. So he's really going for it. You can tell this guy does not like him. Attack him in this way because Athens was captured and occupied. Again, a bit harsh. So Themistocles said many things against him and the Corinthians, I bet he did, declaring so long as they had 200-man ships, the Athenians both had a city and a land greater than theirs. Ooh, what a comeback. And none of the Greeks would repel them if they attacked. So the Athenians have such a strong navy. It doesn't matter if we have a city, we have the boats. We're cooler. This is the gist of that. I just really like that section. It just makes me chuckle. It's a really horrible thing to say, and it's a really good comeback. So then Themistocles turns away from him after putting him down, putting him in his place. He turns back to Eurybiades and says even more strongly than more vehemently or strongly before, if you remain here, you'll be a noble man. If not, you will ruin Hellas. You will destroy Greece. All our strength for war is in our ships. So listen to me. If you do not do this, we will immediately gather up our household and travel to Cyrus in Italy. So basically, we will run away because if you decide to go that way, it's ridiculous and we're all going to die. Then, when Themistocles said this, Eurybiades changed his mind. I bet he did, because Themistocles put a good argument forward. He did so chiefly out of fear that the Athenians might desert them. Yeah, that's what Themistocles has kind of implied. If they sail for the Isthmus, if the Athenians left, the rest will be no match for the enemy. So he had no choice. He has to stay and fight. So then it skips again. Sorry. So those at the Isthmus were involved in so great a labour, since her stake was they did not expect the ships to win distinction. Those at Salamis heard of their labours were still full of dread, fearing for themselves but for the Peloponnese. So this was before the battle, and they were very worried. For a time each man talked quietly to his neighbour, wondering at Eurybiades' folly, but finally it came out into the open. They held an assembly and talked at length on the same matters as before. So again, you still have the Greeks being divided. Even though they've made a decision, they're still divided about what to do. And at this meeting, they have exactly the same conversation as they had previously had. Fortunately for us, we don't need to reread the same discussion. Apologies, that is my phone coming through with text. fascinating insight into my life. So then we have a bit of Herodotus talking about the battle. So then we have the Athenian version of what happens. So they say that the Corinthian general, the Adeimantus, is terrified and kind of bewildered, and he sails away because he's a coward. And then the other Corinthians see this flagship fleeing, and they also depart. Now, whether this did happen, don't know. Certainly what the Athenians are saying, but we also know that the Athenians and the Corinthians aren't exactly friends. Well, they're friends, they're allies, but they don't like each other, because obviously this guy was really rude to Themistocles. So funny enough, the Athenians are like, well, the Corinthians are cowards. And then essentially, there's something about some gods here, and it makes this guy change his mind. It's like a vision. And so he turns around and he comes back to the fleet, but he missed the battle. And then the Athenians spread this rumour about them being cowards, but obviously the Corinthians don't agree, and they consider themselves being the foremost of the battle the whole way through. And then Herodotus just has a slightly pithy line of the rest of Hellas bears them witness. So he's all saying, Greece knows the truth. The Athenians say one thing, the Corinthians say another, but we know what the truth is. So essentially he's saying the Athenians are correct, because remember that Herodotus supports the Athenians. And then again we jump a little bit in the narrative. And now we have discussions with the Persian commanders. So Xerxes, Mardonius, and someone else is going to turn up. Yes, Mardonius is indeed around yet again. So Mardonius has obviously seen that Xerxes is really distressed because of what's happened at Salamis. And he suspects that he turned to flee from Athens. And because of that, Mardonius is really worried that he's going to be punished for persuading the king to march against Greece. Because remember, he was part of the main discussions for the preparations in 480. So he's going to try and save his own skin. So he sort of makes a proposal, be not grieved nor greatly distressed because of what's befallen us. Don't panic, we're going to be fine. It is not on things of wood that the issue hangs for us, but on men and horses. So, I don't know why I didn't highlight that. He's sort of saying, yes, we've lost a load of boats, but ultimately we have more men, so we will win in the end, because that's how we always win battles. We have more men and horses, and we are always successful. Furthermore, there is no one among these men who thinks that he has now won a crowning victory and disembarked from a ship in an attempt to withstand you. No, nor anyone from this mainland. Those who have withstood us have paid the penalty, so others who have sort of fought against us in previous kind of campaigns have ended up losing, and obviously we then punish them. So this will happen to the Athenians and the Greeks. So don't, lose faith now, just keep going. If you then so desire, let us straight away attack the Peloponnese and go around sort of towards Sparta. Or if it pleases you to wait, that is also what we can do. So he's giving Xerxes a couple of different options, but obviously the way he's phrasing things is showing you which one he wants Xerxes to do. Do not be downcast, for the Greeks have no way of escaping the guilt for their former and latter deeds from becoming your slaves, so you're going to win in the end. It is best then that you should do as I have said, but if you have resolved to lead your army away, then I have another plan. Do not, O king, make the Persians a laughingstock of the Greeks. So again, he's kind of stirring up Xerxes against the Greeks, because it's in his own best interest that Xerxes stays and he's fighting. For if you have suffered harm, it is no fault of the Persians. I'm not sure that's true. Nor can you say that we have anywhere done less than brave men should. If the Phoenicians and the Egyptians and the Cyprians, I don't know what I was making up, and the Cilicians have so done, it is not for the Persians who have any part of this disaster. Oh yeah, all these people are rebelling just because they wanted to rebel. So nothing the Persians have done. I'm not sure that's entirely true, Mardonius. Therefore, since the Persians are in no way to blame, be guided by me. Because obviously Mardonius' advice previously has gone so well. If you are resolved not to remain, march homewards with the greater part of your army. It is for me, however, to enslave and deliver Greece to you with 300,000 of your host whom I choose. So he's like, if you want to go, that's fine, I'll stay behind and I will win the glory. Which is pretty much what Xerxes wants to hear, is as in the battle's going to continue, don't fear, it will all be fine. So he's really happy. He says to Mardonius, he's going to have a think about the two plans and then he'll decide what he's going to do. So once he starts to think about it, he calls for a person called Artemisia, who is a lady general. Sounded a bit weird. Yeah, so she's one of the few female commanders that it's the only one we really talk about. quite common in the Persian, well, not that common, but it wasn't unusual either to have female commanders, and she was very good. She was a naval commander, so she is called, and because he saw that she alone at the former sitting had discerned what was better to do, because she'd been right previously, so he's going to listen to her and make his decision at that particular point. So Artemisia arrives, and Xerxes sends everybody else away, and then sort of says to her, it's Mardonius' advice that I should follow here and attack the Peloponnese. For the Persian, he says, and the land army are not to blame for our disaster. So it's all to do with the boats, nothing to do with us. And of that they will willingly give proof. Therefore he advises me to do this, or else he offers to choose 300,000 of the army and deliver Greece to me enslaved. I myself by his counsel march homeward with the rest of the host. I'll return back to Persia. Mardonius will stay here and fight. Now ask of you, seeing you correctly advised me against the late sea fight. Good lord. Counsel me as which of the two things would be best for me to do. So what he's getting lots of different advice from lots of different people. When she was asked for advice, she replied, "It's a difficult, king, to answer your plea for advice by saying which is best, or sensible, saying, oh, I can't tell you what to do. But in the present turn of affairs, I think it's best you march back, and that Mardonius, if he so wishes and promises to, he says, be left here with those whom he desires." So she's essentially agreeing with Mardonius, probably for her own reasons, but anyway. For if he subdues all that he offers to subdue and prospers in his design, the achievement, sire, is yours, since it will be your servants who accomplished it. So if Mardonius wins, you get the glory. If, on the other hand, the issue is contrary to Mardonius' expectation, it is no great misfortune, so long as you and all that household of yours are safe. And while you and the members of your household are safe, many a great time will the Greeks have to fight for their lives. So if it doesn't go well, it doesn't matter, because obviously Xerxes and his family and his kind of key commanders will be safe back in Persia, and they can always come back and fight again. As for Mardonius, if any disaster befalls him, i.e. he dies, it does not much matter. It's a bit harsh, but true. Nor will any victory of the Greeks be a real victory when they have but slain your servants. So in other words, Mardonius doesn't matter. He's just Mardonius. Ultimately, as long as you win in the long run, who particularly cares? As for you, you'll be marching home after the burning of Athens, which was the whole purpose of your expedition. So even if you leave now, you've won, and you can always come back and finish off the Greeks. So Artemisia's counsel pleases Xerxes, for it happened when she spoke, he himself had in mind. So basically, she told him what he wanted to hear. In truth, I think he would not have remained if all the men and women counseled him to do so, because he was panic-stricken. So according to Herodotus, it's not because he thought it was, a clever tactic. He was just really scared and wanted to go home. So he thanks Artemisia, sends her away, and then he goes home. We are nearly there. Whew. So then we have an ever so slightly confusing section of Herodotus, because there's a few people mentioned, and the way he phrases it confuses me when I read it. So we have Alexander, who is from Macedonia, and the Athenians are talking to him. So this is essentially coming after the battle of Salamis. And the Athenians say, we know ourselves that the power of the Persians is many times greater than ours. True. There is no need to taunt us with that. So basically Alexander was trying to convince the Athenians to sort of, Medize really, and come over and be left alone, because obviously, the city's been burned. So this is Athens' reply to all of this. Nevertheless, in our zeal for freedom, we will defend ourselves to the best of our ability. But in regards to agreements with the barbarian, so that's the king, do not attempt to persuade us to enter into them, nor will we consent. Now carry this answer back to Mardonius from the Athenians. So as long as the sun holds the course from which he now goes, we will make no agreement with Xerxes. So Athens is going to stand and fight no matter what. We will fight against him without ceasing, trusting in the aid of the gods and the heroes whom he has disregarded and burnt their houses and their adornments. So he's made us angry. You won't like us if we're angry. Come no more to Athenians. No, come more to the Athenians with such a plea, nor under the semblance of rendering us a service, counsel us to act wickedly. For we do not want those who are our friends and protectors to suffer any harm at Athenian hands. Okay. So such is their answer. And then they speak to some Spartan envoys who then turn up afterwards, and they say something slightly different to the Spartans. It is the most human that the Spartans should fear our making an agreement with the barbarians. So the Spartans were worried that Athens were going to admit Medize as well. We think it is an ignoble thing to be afraid, especially since we know the Athenian temple to be such that there is nowhere on earth of such store or gold, or such territory of surpassing fairness and excellence, that the gift of it should win us to take the Persian part to enslave Hellas. So we're not going to surrender. There are many great reasons why we should not do this, even if we so desired. First and foremost, the burning destruction of the adornments and temples of our gods. So there's a nice effect of conflict here, whom we are constrained to avenge at the utmost, rather than to make pacts with the perpetrator of these things. In other words, we're not going to sign a treaty with someone who's destroyed our city. Fair point. And next, the kinsmen of all Greeks in blood and speech, and shrines of gods and sacrifices that we have in common, and the likeness of a way of life, to all of which it would not befit the Athenians to be false. Know this now, if you knew not before, that as long as one Athenian is left alive, we will make no agreement with Xerxes. So we are going to continue to fight, no matter what. Even though our city has been destroyed, we're going to continue to fight. Nevertheless, we thank you for your forethought, that's really hard to say, concerning us, in that you are so provided for our wasted state that you offer to nourish our households. For your part, you have given us full measure of kindness, yet for ourselves we will make our shift to endure as best as we may, and not be burdensome to you. But now, seeing this is so, send your army with all speed, for as we guess, the barbarian will be upon us and invade our country in no long time. So they're quite aware that obviously Xerxes' army is going to land, there's going to be another battle. As soon as the message comes to him, we will do nothing that he requires of us. Therefore, before he comes into Attica, now's time for us to first march into Boeotia. Yeah, okay. So essentially, they're going to stand and fight no matter what happens. And it doesn't matter that the city's been destroyed, or it doesn't matter that Attica's been destroyed. As long as Greece is there, as long as Athens is there, they will continue to fight against the Persians. So there is all the sources on the Battle of Salamis and the Battle of Artemisia as well that you need to be having a look at.